Now, before the break, we took a look at how rampant corruption has become in New York politics. Our reporter Dominic Carter has basically lived in courthouses for the better part of the last 2 years. One of the cases, Buffalo Billions, bid rigging scheme involving a major economic development initiative. The projects involved big money, big contracts, and a whole lot of opportunities for people to line their own pockets at taxpayer expense. My next guest, he wants to rein in corruption opportunities by enhancing the oversight of the whole procurement process. Tom DiNapoli, Comptroller of the state of New York. And I want to remind everybody, when the current governor came in, there was a promise to change things. This is just a refresher for our audience.
We stand today next to one of the historic monuments to government corruption. This is the Tweed Courthouse. Well, unfortunately, Albany's anti-boss Tweed blush. Our message today is simple. Enough is enough.
Okay. Comptroller, thank you. And I guess if there were three men in the room, as the expression went, with the Senate Majority Leader, Speaker of the Assembly, and the Governor, two of them are going to be in jumpsuits soon. I'm talking obviously about Shelley Silver and Dean Skelos. Nothing's changed. I can argue either we finally found out about the significance of it or it's gotten worse, but nobody's going to argue it's been improved. Now, before we get to, which I think is a really novel idea in terms of going after the procurement process, you were in the Assembly before you became the state controller. Did you know it was this bad and there was enough opportunities, let alone seemingly willingness, for, you know, state employees at the end of the day to self-advantage?
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly over the many years I've been involved, the past few months are not the first time elected officials have gotten into trouble. I think what's a little different now, it's reached the highest levels of government in our state, and that has to be very concerning to everyone. I think what that means is that we need to do more to tighten up our procedures, our laws. I think, as you point out, Richard, in your question, the good news is, from the work of prosecutors, they're taking a more serious look at this. So perhaps some of the situations that perhaps might not have gotten the scrutiny a few years ago, well, now in fact it's getting the scrutiny. And I think you have to give credit to the prosecutors. In this case, it's largely the Southern District, you know, it's been leading the way. They have really ensured that folks that think they can get away with something, and it generally involves money and lining their pockets in some fashion, that in fact, if you're doing wrong, you're going to get caught and you're going to get punished.
Talk about how you changed the procurement process. And we mentioned the Buffalo Billions in the lead up to this, but one of the things that struck me during the Shelley Silver trial and then retrial was this argument that somehow it was business as usual, the idea of using one's office, since you can obviously have a job outside of being a legislator, which I've never understood, but anyway, that somehow it was okay to use basically the imprimatur of, in his case, the state assembly here, to be able to feather your own nest.
Yeah, I think the phrase used at the time was monetizing the office, and obviously that should not be
it's offensive.
The case. It's offensive. Well, it does, in that case, speak to the need to either eliminate or severely limit outside income. And that way you could hopefully avoid these kinds of situations. It's what's done in Congress, you know, where there's a significant limitation.
Pay him a real number. It's 5 days a week, let's be honest. So if you're an attorney and you got a shingle out that you're an attorney, but 4 days of a week at least you're up in Albany or working with constituencies, what do you think someone's going to retain you for? It's not your legal practice, it's your access.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, there's been enhanced disclosure as far as clients for those who have a professional license, largely an attorney. But I think the solution there is to either eliminate or severely limit outside income. In terms of the Buffalo Billion and the bid rigging, you know, that's a different circumstance, but still, same thing. People were lining their pockets. So procurement reform, making sure we have what's called clean contracting. This is an area where, in fact, there was a change, but the change went in the wrong direction. In the interest of efficiency, we reduced the oversight and the independent review of construction contracts for SUNY and CUNY, for centralized contracts that can be in the billions of dollars. What was taken away was some of our Comptroller office oversight. So we have a bill that we proposed, it actually passed the Senate and it's still pending in the Assembly, to restore oversight. And in fact, expand the oversight and to prohibit the use of these nonprofits that were set up as a way to funnel the money for economic development through SUNY. It was a way to avoid the normal scrutiny that would happen if you were spending the money through state agencies.
Yep.
And then there's also reform groups that propose the database of deals where there'll be more transparency on where the money is going.
You mentioned taxes on the federal side. Talk about SALT, the new tax law enacted by our president here. How's it going to impact New York State? It's certainly not going to be for the better.
Well, it's going to be negative. It's going to be negative for households. You know, people ask me all the time, what will it mean in terms of revenue coming to the state? Will taxpayers, you know, move away because they can't afford to live here anymore? Probably too soon to tell in terms of reaction that way. But for folks in Westchester, I live on Long Island, you know, the $10,000 cap on state and local tax deduction, you know, if you're paying $10,000 in property tax, actually a modest tax bill in many of our communities downstate. So there's no doubt it's really going to have a very negative impact. In the state budget, the governor proposed and the legislature included some possible ways around it. I'm not sure how applicable they're going to be. One of them was the idea of setting up a charitable trust in municipalities and school districts as a way to pay that way instead of the tax and still get the charitable deduction. There's some questions of whether or not the IRS will allow that. And as you know, New York has joined with other states now in suing the federal government, saying that this was targeted in a very political way against certain states.
You mentioned other states. We're seeing, as some of our viewers know, in New Jersey, a movement to generate more revenue through legalization of sports betting, even conversations about marijuana. Two vices, but yet promises, especially for cash-strapped states here, about more revenue coming in. What are your feelings about that?
Well, you know, I would say on whether it's gaming or legalization of marijuana, if we're going to move in that direction, and obviously with gaming, we have in New York, we should do it on the pluses and minuses of that change, not to generate revenue. I mean, I just think those are important societal issues that need to be looked at. And certainly, you know, with gaming in New York, although more casinos were authorized, we've not realized the kind of revenue that was expected. Is there a net plus? Yeah, at least for now there is. But you know, we've authorized so many more casinos in all the states around us. Virtually all of them have casinos as well, so you're competing for a finite amount of money. You know, with regard to legalizing marijuana, we certainly see a number of states moving in that direction. The Department of Health just put out a report basically saying the pros outnumber the cons, and estimated a revenue impact of anywhere from $240 million to over $600 million coming to the state. Again, I think the bigger question is, does that make sense for us to make that decision? Let's put separate the issue of generating revenue. I'd like to not think we make those kinds of big changes just because we think it's going to make more money for us.
And by the way, check out the website here. We got it on the bottom of the screen for unclaimed funds. I found a few bucks. All right. Controller, thank you as always. I really appreciate it. Coming up next, some local congressional races that are getting a lot of attention, even nationally. One involving a race controversy in the Hudson Valley. The other, a political newcomer struggling to get her footing, even after pulling off a shocking primary upset of one Joe Crowley.